The year is 2042. Humanity has managed to successfully recover from the various crises of the beginning of this 21st century. Of course, many challenges remain, such as climate change, biodiversity, but thanks to the shift towards more resilient systems, humanity is now able to put all hands on deck and deal with crises in a much more efficient way. After the coronavirus crises, the financial system broke down. It went through deflation first, with a degradation of all economic indicators, from consumption to investment to production, and then followed with hyperinflation as centralized institutions attempted to revive the economy by printing too much money. But every crisis is also an opportunity for positive change, and the coronavirus crisis served just that purpose. As Lao Tzu said, "New beginnings are often disguised as painful endings." Although most people would think that solutions were technical, with pages upon pages of complex policy recommendations, we harnessed a new field which has revolutionized just about every field of study: biomimicry, or taking inspiration from nature. Biomimicry has been at the center of many innovations such as Velcro, aerodynamics, designing new building materials, and so much more. But it was never applied to finance. How does nature allocate resources? The best example we have is simply that of energy and resource allocation within our own bodies. Our bodies are exceptionally efficient in distributing energy or oxygen to all of our cells. Every cell has access to the amount of energy it needs, and the amount it is granted fluctuates depending on what your body is doing. When you're running, energy rushes to your legs. When you sit down to take a test, energy rushes to your brain. If it worked any other way, you would either trip and fall or pointlessly stare at your test without being able to answer the most basic question. The financial system we have transitioned to by 2042 works just like that. Ultimately, our financial system works just like our circulatory system. Every single human being receives a sort of universal basic income. But it isn't the kind of UBI which exists within a debt-based system. More accurately, every single living human generates an equal amount of money every day. It is called a universal dividend. Then exchanges happen. As people spend their universal dividend, money concentrates where it is most needed. Money therefore becomes a form of voting system, which is used to determine what each single person finds valuable at any point in time. If most people decide to buy organic food, money concentrates with the producers of organic food, which allows them to upscale their economic activity. Within the old debt-based system, money left the economy as the debt was repaid. In our current system, money is never destroyed. It is rather periodically debased, steadily losing value over time. This type of system mimics perfectly the way our own bodies distribute energy based on the needs, and the needs are defined by the daily choices made by each individual. We quickly realized that a debt-based monetary system comes with many features that make it incompatible with the flexibility required in a very complex world, where needs fluctuate all the time. A debt-based system requires growth to enable to repay the interest on the debt. A debt-based system puts private banks in a disproportionate position of power in determining what the economy looks like. Since money is created via debt, banks determine which businesses can access credit and which businesses can't, thereby determining what is on the menu for consumers to purchase, or what jobs are available on the labor market. It is as if the private banks detained most of the voting right to influence what the economy looks like. A debt-based system can't handle goods that are produced by Mother Nature for free. If a good or service comes into existence without the need for a loan, then there is no money justifying its existence on the market. To explain it in simple terms, imagine a village with no money. If you pick an apple from a tree and try to sell it on the market, no one can buy it since no one has any money. But if you take a loan to buy a tractor to help plant apple trees and buy pesticides to protect your apples, then you pick them from your tree to sell them, and the people who sold you the pesticides and the tractors can buy the apple from you. In other words, under a debt-based system, every single good and service should ideally require taking a credit to ensure that there is always enough money in the economy to be able to sell it. A debt-based system is also very bad at Schumpeterian creative destruction. It has a vested interest in keeping alive industries and corporations that should have died a long time ago, but that are kept alive just because they owe so much debt that letting them go bankrupt could trigger a banking crisis. The technical term to describe these corporations are stranded assets. Our current system is very resilient. Since new money is injected into the economy each day through the universal dividend, the relative share of those who own most of the money shrinks over time. This mirrors what happens in your own body when you're done performing a specific task, like running or digesting food. The amount of energy drawn by your legs or your stomach returns to normal. It is also much more stable and resilient to crises. Since everything in this system is fully transparent and predictable, there is no way to speculate or game the system. If you know the size of the population, then you know exactly how much fresh money will be injected into the economy each day. The stability of this system comes from the principle of relativity. In order to measure anything, you need a stable point of reference. For instance, in physics, the speed of light serves such a point of reference, which is stable, and then everything else can fluctuate relative to the speed of light. In our monetary system, the prices of goods and services are measured via this universal dividend. In a debt-based monetary system, keeping stability is a challenge since it depends on the synchronous fluctuation of the monetary mass and the availability of goods and services. If these two are out of balance, a crisis inevitably occurs. Taxation has been simplified to the extreme also. The governments simply tax around 35% of the universal dividend upon creation. By adding VAT, the government can collect a comparable amount of tax revenue as in the legacy system without the need to tax salaries, corporations, etc. Only taxes which are used to incentivize certain actions or disincentivize others are kept. There is also no need to redistribute wealth. First, since the government collects a certain amount of money each day by directly taxing monetary creation, they can still keep up social programs for the unemployed or persons with disabilities and so forth. Second, given the way the system works, since money is debased on a regular basis, those who accumulate wealth see their total share of the monetary mass shrink each day. Thus, for anyone to stay wealthy, people need to periodically keep sending them fresh money, just like our bodies keep sending fresh oxygen to our legs as long as we run. Did we get rid of banks and credit? Not really. But now they only act as true intermediaries between savers and borrowers. Any and all loans are transformed into bonds, which have to be bought by people. When anyone takes out a loan, it is money that is pooled from the savings of individuals. Thus, any debt is owned by the citizens. Such a system already existed for a long time in Denmark, where certain special banks issued covered bonds to create mortgage loans. Of course, there's a lot more to say. With this new system, velocity of money can be controlled at a much more granular level. For instance, if humanity faces a crisis and needs fresh money quickly, the velocity of money can be accelerated by paying salaries weekly or even daily instead of monthly. This idea of having to wait a whole month to receive your salary artificially slows down money velocity, since money stays on the account of your employer for a month, not moving at all, while if it were paid more frequently, it could change hands multiple times in periods of need. Governments could also exceptionally increase the amount of the universal dividend. It's just like when you need to suddenly run to escape from a predator. Your body quickly generates additional resources and energy consumption shoots up. However, it is much more efficient than the quantitative easing, which hardly reached the real economy and people. All in all, the system that we currently have mirrors perfectly the basic layer of energy available to our cells, oxygen. As you can imagine, just like our bodies, we have a multi-layered financial system. Crypto assets basically play the role of water and food, minerals, vitamins, proteins, sugars. While each cell feeds off of oxygen as its basic source of energy, each cell also requires a custom set of nutrients. Crypto assets serve that very purpose, since many of them are unique and are used for a specific action like paying for a decentralized cloud service, executing a smart contract, buying and selling ownership of tokenized assets, and so forth. In 2042, certain crypto assets like Ethereum have become more important than others as they play the role of water, an important base layer which facilitates complex interactions between people, setting up decentralized cooperatives, running a host of smart contracts, and more. The debt-based system could not handle the emergence of crypto assets. Once people started using them for other purposes besides speculation, and even used them as means of exchange, it amounted to a virtual multiplication of the monetary mass, which threatened to generate mass inflation. Only a system which had a mathematically determined stability via stable creation-destruction parameters could handle the emergence of crypto assets. It also allowed to stabilize the value of crypto assets, since their value could now be measured thanks to a neutral and predictable measuring stick. Again, this combination mirrors the wisdom of energy and resource management in our own bodies. The reason why a person doesn't die when eating bad sushi is thanks to our respiratory system and the continuous and stable inflow of oxygen to each and every cell. In the first few decades, humanity's relationship to crypto assets was the same as the relationship between a baby and food. A baby sticks just about anything into its mouth. Some crypto assets succeeded, while others gave humanity diarrhea. But in order to allow people to experiment with crypto assets without dying from indigestion, we need to first create a highly resilient and stabilizing base layer. Since every person is guaranteed to receive their universal dividend for life, it allows them to experiment and try things without putting their entire livelihood in jeopardy. The transformation of the financial system basically transformed the entire economy into a giant financial democracy, a giant permanent crowdfunding, where the role of governments and private banks was no longer as important, and where the combined daily individual decisions made by people were then reflected in the economy. It allowed to move away from the obsessive-compulsive need of governments to control and micromanage the economy and trust that people's decisions would bring about a wisdom of the crowd effect. We had to address the same fears as those we lived through when we switched to full representative democracy. The fact that people were uneducated and stupid and would make poor decisions in voting people into government. In the end, while democracy is far from perfect, it is still much better than to have remained under the tyrannical reign of kings and queens. The world in 2042 is far from perfect, but thanks to a resilient financial system, we can handle the world's imperfections. There is so much more to say, of course. What really changed our reality was a paradigm shift. To best understand just how revolutionary a paradigm shift is, here is a little example. Lightning strikes. Quick, bring me my youngest son. I shall offer him as a sacrifice to calm the wrath of the gods. Lightning strikes. It's just a normal electric phenomenon. Here, let's install a lightning rod and everything will be fine. From this simple example, we can see that while the outer world has not changed, lightning remains lightning. The way we interact with the outer world has changed completely. The last paradigm shift humanity has undergone was a shift from monotheist religions to materialist science. A paradigm shift was a prerequisite for people to take an interest in their material well-being and the world around them, as opposed to blindly following what religious leaders told them and being obsessed only with saving one's soul in order to go to heaven. Humanity has undergone the same revolution in the first half of the 21st century with a completely transformed outlook on reality. The universe is full of repeating patterns and principles, from fractals, spirals, mathematical proportions like the golden ratio, whether looking at lightning, a tree, or our nervous system, an atom and a solar system, our skin and a leaf, flowers, fruits and vegetables. Why were we so adamant that humanity was outside of nature, that we had not developed exactly as we were always supposed to? Biomimicry was only the first step. We very soon realized that we had never left biomimicry. From the very beginning, it would seem that we had unconsciously replicated on the outside the wisdom and experience we had all gone through on the inside. After all, the information inside our cells, what we call our DNA, is responsible for the way they organize on the outside, which manifests as our body. What if our very body wasn't a form of template or DNA responsible for determining what we manifest on the outside? Once you consider that each human is but a cell in some kind of global collective organism, then many things start to take on a very different meaning. As a global organism, we have developed and grown on this planet in very much the same way as we have grown in our own mother's womb. Starting from a stem cell, the ovum, or Lucy at our level, our common ancestor, then multiplying and multiplying. At a certain point, we split into different groups, separated into different continents, cultures, languages, and eventually even forming countries, in much the same way as stem cells specialize and form different organs. The internet, telecommunications, cables running all around the world are the equivalent to our nervous system. Our current obsession with artificial intelligence and the fear of creating a singularity mirrors what our own brain and consciousness must feel to our body's cells, a higher form of intelligence sending commands through a network of cables we call nerves. The energy crises, peak oil, and the necessary energetic transition is the equivalent to what we have experienced while still in our mother's womb. We are indeed still very dependent on our mother's blood, and at birth have transitioned more or less abruptly from one unsustainable source of energy to a more sustainable one, while simultaneously completely transforming the relationship with our mother from being a parasite growing exponentially in a limited space, draining all of our mother's resources like a vampire, to a much more symbiotic and respectful one, where we rely only partially on our mother's resources while feeding on a seemingly unlimited source of energy, oxygen. Towards the end of pregnancy, we also nearly poisoned ourselves in our own waste, our own feces, as the womb could no longer recycle our urine fast enough to transform it back into edible amniotic fluid, sometimes going as far as poisoning ourselves in our very first bowel movement, the meconium. The repeating crises becoming more and more frequent are very much like contractions leading up to our own birth. The coronavirus, which spread across the world and whose main symptoms were death by suffocation, also mirror the situation a baby could encounter towards the end of pregnancy, as the placenta is no longer capable of providing for the baby's needs and the individual cells suffering from suffocation. So again, what has really changed on the outside? A lightning strike remains a lightning strike, the same as a financial crisis remains a financial crisis. But what may seem like random and meaningless from one vantage point might make perfect sense from another. Our understanding of the events that unfolded in the early 21st century, the meaning we assigned to them, changed completely the way we reacted to them, and thereby completely transformed the reality we experienced. A shift from a tribal animist paradigm to a materialist science paradigm allowed us to go from living in caves to build modern houses, cars, computers, and more. And so while climate change, the coronavirus, and various financial crises may seem to happen for no reason from a materialist science lens, from another perspective, they appear as completely normal and foreseeable. We have simply replicated the experience that we have all been through on the inside in our outer reality. And this paradigm shift changed humanity's priorities. Instead of chasing after new technologies or highly complex solutions to problems beyond our control and understanding, we simply focused on replicating the harmonious interactions between the cells and organs in our body to the behavior of humans towards one another. Are you ready to behave like one cell in a global collective organism? That is the most important question every human has had to answer in the years leading up to 2042. Compare the experience of unicellular organisms fighting each other for resources in a swamp to the experience that the cells in your body are having right now. Which experience do you want to have? Unity or division? Harmony or dissonance? The choice is yours.